Hi guys. So I'm here to discuss section 1, pages 1 through 7 with you. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to go ahead and look at is vocabulary. So when we're talking about Fahrenheit 451, there's so much awesome vocabulary in this. And they're just words worth knowing. It's things that are words that will make you sound like you know what you're talking about, sound more intelligent. And they're words that might come up on things like the SAT or the ACT. It never hurts to have some $5 words in your back pocket that you can pull out. So let's get started, shall we? So the first one, this is a word that's going to come up a lot. So it's kerosene, which is, first comes up on page 1, where Bradbury writes, with the brass nozzle in his fist, with this great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world. So we can kind of tell by venomous that it's probably going to be a word that maybe is a little bit more negative, like it's a thing that causes harm. So kerosene, as you can see right here, is a type of gasoline, basically. It's like an old-timey gasoline. If you've ever been on like an old ship, like the Star of India, that kind of oily gas smell, like it's like an oil-based liquid, that's what kerosene smells like. So later on, Montag will talk about how he always kind of smells like gas, like kerosene. It's a smell that really sticks with them. So whenever you see the word kerosene, it's fuel that they spray on the houses in order to light the houses on fire. Our next word is stolid. So when you think of stolid, you can almost take that T out of there and think solid. So it's someone who's just very controlled and very kind of flat in their affect. They aren't really bothered by things. They're kind of like that friend that when things are going crazy, they're just like the person that kind of keeps everything calm and together. It first comes up when the author's describing Montag with his symbolic helmet numbered 451 on his stolid head. So Montag is kind of like this rock. Like he's just kind of real straightforward, doesn't get bothered, doesn't get upset. He is a stolid person for now. This one is interesting. So this comes up on page 2. This is where Montag talks about his appearance after coming back from a fire. So he comes back to the firehouse and he's feeling real pleased with himself. Like he's real happy, like, ooh, we just burnt a house down. So he describes, he knew that when he returned to the firehouse, he might wink at himself, a minstrel man, burnt corked in the mirror. So this is, burnt corked is this right here. So it's basically where you take a flame and you hold a cork over it, and then the edge of the cork gets blackened, and you can kind of rub that on your face and make your face black. You might have heard the term blackface. It's something that's not really condoned in our society anymore. It was a way of making fun of African Americans, people of color. So you can see here, this is a poster from a show. This is like in the 1910s, 1920s, that this was really common. White people, this person here, would then use a cork to blacken his face, and then he would perform a show that was very derogatory towards Black people in society. It would make fun of them. It would kind of make them seem foolish. So when we talk about a minstrel show, that's a word that's still used today. It's referring to something that's kind of making a mockery of people. Is a minstrel, like you're being a minstrel right now, is saying like you're making fun of the thing that you're doing. So we don't do blackface. We don't use burnt corks, but it's important to know this language because it is unfortunately a part of American history. So it's good to know. Okay, so that's it for vocab. The next thing we're going to look at are these literary elements. So throughout this book, you're going to see there's going to be a lot of literary elements that we can focus in on. We're going to talk about these because it's important to know moving forward, especially in 10th, you're going to do a lot of literary analysis. You're going to spend a lot of time really pulling apart the elements of a text and critically analyzing why authors make the decision they do. Your entire senior level English class, when you're 12th graders, is completely focused on why authors do the things they do. So never hurts to get a jump on that and to really start understanding. People don't just kind of sit down and write a book and be like, ah, whatever, just have the characters do this, right? Everything has a purpose. So there's a reason that things are written or done the way that they're done. And that's a big part of literary analysis, is understanding those choices. So we'll start with our first one, the hook. So this is the very beginning of our book. we've talked about these in our writing before, and Bradbury really gives us a masterful hook here. So a hook is the opening of a story, and it kind of grabs the reader's attention so they'll keep reading. If your beginning of your book is boring, people are gonna be like, I'm not into this book, and get rid of it, right? It can be shocking. It can introduce the story. It can start introducing the characters, but it's usually something that you read and you're like, oh, I want to know more about this. Like, why, what is going on here? Its whole purpose is just to keep you reading. So here's our hook for Fahrenheit 451. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. So in this, Bradbury is making you wonder some things, right? So go ahead and take a second. What is he trying to make you wonder? So just think about that for a moment. Okay, so let's kind of take this sentence by sentence. It was a pleasure to burn. Right off the bat, you're kind of like, wait, what? Because usually when something's burning down, a house or a, like maybe you have a campsite and the campsite catches fire or anything, if it catches on fire, it's getting destroyed. Things don't catch on fire and then, you know, are better off for it necessarily. It's usually something that catches on fire gets destroyed. So for things to be enjoyable to burn, it already makes you wonder like, what kind of person would like burning things? Like what would make that an enjoyable thing to do, right? So right off the bat, you're already kind of wondering. Then he talks about it was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. So here he's clarifying. There is no doubt that he's talking about destruction. That it is real enjoyable for whoever this person is that's saying this to destroy things. He's really enjoying it. We later, in a few sentences, find out that this is Montag, our main character, who really loves seeing things destroyed. And we kind of wonder what kind of person Montag is, and it makes us want to keep reading. So it's one of the best hooks in literary history, in my opinion, because it makes you just wonder so many things about this person who enjoys destruction and a society that condones it. So moving on, our next literary strategy, which is just abundant in this text, is imagery. So imagery in a literary text is an author's use of vivid and descriptive language to add depth to their work. So sensory imagery appeals to the human senses to deepen the reader's understanding of the work, and powerful forms of imagery engage all the senses. So something that makes you see, sight is the most common one. It's easy to describe what something looks like visual. Smell, when he talks about the smell of the kerosene sticking to them, the smell of the char in the air from the burnt books. Smell is another one that you'll see a lot in this book. Taste doesn't come up as much. There are a few parts, but taste is one of those ones, it's easy to describe, especially if you're writing about food. You can sometimes like taste it in your mouth and you're like, oh, that sounds so good right now. Sound, hearing things. So like, what did it sound like? He talks about the crackle of burning books. You can, if you've ever sat by a campfire, you know that crackle is kind of like a popping sound. And touch is kind of like when Montag talks about, later on, he touches the book and he talks about how the paper feels and the cover. So Bradbury really does a lot to take you to this society and really put you there right with Montag so you can experience what he's experiencing and go through the process that he's going through. So here's some examples just within those first few pages. So the first one, with the brass nozzle in his fist, with this great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world. So just from the beginning, the brass nozzle. If you've ever seen like an old fire hose, they have those big, heavy nozzles on the end. So you can imagine Montag probably has gloves on, and he's holding this big old brass nozzle. It's probably heavy. Maybe it's a little bit shiny. So he's holding that in his fist. So fist means like he's holding on for dear life. This thing probably weighs a ton. This great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world. So he's giving you some snake imagery, like he has this big, huge snake behind him. If you've ever seen the fire hoses, they're huge in diameter. So he has this big fire hose, and it's just like spitting its kerosene upon the world. So it's like this poisonous liquid that you can just see if it touches something, it's like sizzling and sinking into it. So you're kind of getting this impression of this way this fire hose looks. He could have written something like, Montag held the fire hose and sprayed kerosene on the house, right? But that's just not as engaging. Like this really makes you picture that huge fire hose and this oily, greasy liquid that's being sprayed on the house. Next one, he flicked the igniter and the house jumped up in a gorging fire. So he kind of does a little spark and the whole house, it doesn't catch on fire, it jumps into fire. So it's exploding into flame. And then finally, in kind of a departure from talking about the way that the house looks or the destruction element of things, he talks about Clarice, who we meet in this chapter. Her face was slender and milk white, and it was in kind of a gentle hunger that touched over everything with tireless curiosity. So that's gentle hunger is an interesting turn of phrase because they're very similar, right? Think about the times when you're hungry and then how you eat after you get some food when you're hungry. You're like, rah, 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 right? You don't like gently eat. You devour it, right? But she has a gentle hunger. So there's like a desire there, but she's very like calm and controlled about it. Her face was slender and milk white. So remember, Montag has just gotten off work. So his face is like charred and blackened. And her face is slender. She's clean, delicate. And she's just kind of taking in the world around her. And the fact that Montag notes this shows us something about the rest of society, that people in this world that they live in don't really pay attention to what's going on around them, right? But Clarice is different. So she stands out. She just kind of wants to learn about everything and is curious and interested. So she stands out for those reasons. Something to consider. So we have two examples of destruction, and then we have an example of Clarice, who's kind of the opposite of destruction, right? So when we look at these as a whole, how does this contrast of image hint at the novel's central conflict? So we have destruction versus like growth and curiosity. So what comes about when those two forces hit, right? When you have somebody who's focused on growth and peace and learning, what happens when they come up with somebody who's like, yeah, destruction, right? Like, what is that going to be like when those two people clash or come together? Will they change? Will they fight? What is going to happen out of that conflict? So that's something to consider as you move forward, is look for those examples of Clarice being this like gentle, creative figure and Montag being this very harsh, destructive figure, and what happens when those two forces come together. So I'm really hoping you're enjoying this book so far. I'll make one of these videos for each section just to make sure you're getting through this. And remember to respond to my questions that I leave for you in the discussion boards. It'll help you clarify as we're moving through this book, because things get a little crazy here in a little bit. So I hope to see you all on the discussion boards, and we'll keep working through these sections. Okay, hope you're staying safe. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email.